Okay, so today we're gonna, if you look in the daily work folder on La Lima, April 1st, so don't necessarily believe everything you hear today, but everything we cover for class will be accurate. Okay, so we're going to work on project 2. Let me open up the project 2 HTML file because we definitely are going to make use of that. And there's a bunch of things that it says to work on, and it gives good information as to the actual names of the PySide widgets. Okay, so widgets would be basically anything they put up that's part of the GUI interface. Okay, so it could be a menu item, it could be dialog boxes, things of that nature. Okay, those are what we call widgets for PySide. And today's HTML file, the daily work one, goes into the names of the stuff that you need to use, and that should be helpful to you. Okay, also, if you look at the project 2 HTML page, in the bottom where it has steps to complete project 2, it says documentation for using it can be found here. So I'm going to click on that. This is actually a page from my CENT110 course. And it has some basic information on doing GUI programming with PySide. And let me see, if I scroll down a little bit, this has PySide 1.2.1 documentation. So I'm going to open that in another tab. And then this series of tutorials, I'm going to also open that in another tab. So we got a bunch of stuff that is open that we're going to take a look at. Okay, so we're going to return back to the daily work part, because that puts kind of step by step what we need to do in order to get going, work further on project 2. Okay, so if you look at the daily work from last time, okay, so 27, that folder has a completed version of demo_subprocess.py, and it also has the init.sql that we basically created by just copying and pasting from the project2.html page. Okay, so you could go and grab those and copy them into your project 2 folder. Let's kind of review what we created last time. Okay, so in the documents, Docker, main Docker folder, okay, where we're going to be doing all of our work is inside of docs, a folder called project 2. And so what I did last time is I created the demo_subprocess.py. That's up on the daily work from last time, that file. So is init.sql. And then query db2.py is from the project 2 folder. And all I did was made a copy of it called project2.py. And that way, if you make changes to project2.py and then somehow it gets messed up, you could always go back to that one real easily without having to re-download it. Okay, although it is in the project 2 folder on La Lima. Okay, so if you went to resources, projects, and then project 2, okay, the query _db2.py is there. Okay, now, what we want to do, we probably will get to this and work somewhat on it, is I'm going to also take cars.txt and customers.txt and save that into the project 2 folder. Okay, so I'm going to go save link as, and this is the project 2 folder, and customers.txt. And again, it's already in the project 2 folder, because that's where I saved some stuff last from the browser. So I just put those 2 files there. Okay, I already started up the virtual machine with our Docker daemon. I already started up Docker machine, so that's connected. So what I need to do is I'm going to start up conemu and open up a terminal to the project 2 folder once I get everything started up. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Oh, also, because we're going to be using a Python GUI program, PySite is a GUI framework, then we also need to start up MobaXterm. Okay, but let's start up our conemu terminal first. Okay, and then just type the environment variables in from the my Docker machine. I'm going to change into our main Docker folder, and then I'm going to start up the containers. And then I'm going to go into the Postgres SQL container and run bash. Okay, and if you look in the /home directory, there's that project 2 directory. And so that's the one that I want to change into. Okay, if I do an ls from there, there's a number of files there, and let's talk about each of them. Okay, so this is brand new for today. We just copied those in, and that's in the project 2 folder inside of projects from Lalima. We're not going to deal with those right off the bat, but we will get to that a little bit later. Hey, then there's demos_subprocess.py. That's what we came up with last time. It was a copy and paste from the project2.html page, but then I made a few changes to it. Okay, so that's the one that is uploaded into the daily work folder from last time. Okay, init.sql is basically copied and pasted from project2.html. That's also in the daily work folder from last time. Okay, then I have proj2.py and query_db2.py. We did run project2.py last time, and when we did that, we had to make sure that we open up MobaXterm because that's a GUI program. So let me minimize this and start up MobaXterm and wait until the X11 server starts up. Okay, so it's still orange right now, but when it turns green, okay, if I move the mouse over, reminds me that I need to set my display environment variable to 10.60.3.100:0.0. Yours will be different depending, because you're sitting at a different computer. Okay, so if you were sitting right here at computer 2, it will be 10.60.3.2:0.0. Okay, so I'm going to return to my conemu terminal, and I'm going to export display. Okay, so 10.60.3. And this is where yours is different. Okay, instead of 100, you'd be basically putting the computer number. Okay, so I know we've done that before, but just a reminder, you're not going to type exactly the same thing I have here, because the IP address you need to use, okay, is for your computer, not the one that I'm working on right now. Okay, so 10.60.3 dot whatever your computer number is colon 0.0. Okay, so that means the first display. Okay. So to check it, right, before we go too much further, if you have either query db2.py or you copied that, so you have proj2.py, then you can just run it, okay, as I'm doing right here. And if I wait a little while, okay, it starts up and then it looks like this. Okay, so then I know my display variable is set correctly because I can run a GUI program. Okay, so that's the first step. We're going to actually make some modifications to project2.py. And the order that we're going to make those changes is we're going to follow what I have in the daily work for today. Okay, so I'm going to close this because I'm going to make changes to it. So I want to start it up again after I make some changes. All right, so let's go back to the daily work for today. Okay, so first thing it says is to make a copy of db2.query underscore db2.py and call it proj2.py, okay, and put it inside the project2 folder. Okay, I already did that last time, but if you didn't do that, then go ahead and do that. Then the next step in this is to use a qtgui.quActionItem widget, okay, to make a menu item. Okay, so what it's going to be, what it's going to look like if I run this, okay, is right now on the file menu, there's only one menu item, quit. Okay, we're going to add a second menu item so that we can open the SQL file that we basically want to run on the database. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind it. Okay, so I'm going to right-click on my proj2.py and open it with Genie. Okay, so let's start going over some of the basics of this. The class name is QueryDB. Where that's going to be made use of whenever you do PySide programming, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. Is right here on the second to the last line of code. So if I change my class name, this is basically calling the constructor for the class. You change your class name, then you would have to change this code right here. Now there's no reason to change the class name, so we're going to just leave that. But that's just so that you get some understanding of how this thing starts off. Okay. We talked about this before, but when you have that special function that's double underscore init double underscore, that's the constructor for the class. So that's what gets called when you just go put the class name followed by parentheses. It calls a constructor. What does it do? It actually extends the QMain window class that's in the QtGUI module. Okay? And so PySide, they have a number of modules. This is just for core functionality, nothing to do with an actual GUI program. QtGUI is where they keep all the widgets. Okay? So windows, buttons, menu items, dialog boxes, everything. It's all inside a QtGUI. Now, sometimes when people put import statements in Python, they would put something like from PySide import qtgui.star, which would mean that when they use those things, they don't have to put this as the preface to whatever they're calling. I don't like to do that for any framework where you're using more than one module, because what I want to see is that this class is actually in the Qt GUI module, right? So I don't want to say import Qt GUI.star and just be able to type QMain window, because then I can't tell what module that class is coming from. Okay, so that's my style of doing stuff, but that's the reason why I do it. Or doesn't, yeah, change this to CENT280 dB. Oh, there's no underscore. That's okay. And then I'll create the data. Yeah. So, yeah, this should have been CENT280 dB. And then so now you'll be able to connect. Okay, so if you look at this constructor, right now it doesn't make use of a table yet, but it's going to definitely make use of a table later. So whenever you see self.this, those are instance variables. They're variables that basically can be seen in any function that passes self as a parameter. Okay, so any class function is going to be seen. All right, so we're going to call the init menu function. So when I go self.init menu, right, you can tell this is different from this because there's parentheses, so it's calling a function, it's calling a class function. That's why you put self dot when you call it. Okay? Okay? Because if you call other functions you define, it doesn't have self in front of it, right? Self means that it's a class function. That's referring to it. Okay, so this is to initialize the menu, which we want to deal with. This is to initialize the user interface. Okay, so what that is all the things that you see. We have 2 pages. It's actually 2 tabs, so that's what creates the 2 different tabs and puts things onto that. Okay. Here's a connection string. It's just an empty string. It's just a variable. The reason why this kind of thing is done, and you want to keep that in mind, is because somewhere I'm going to set a value to self.connectionString, and I want that variable the value of that variable to be available in every function that has self as the first parameter. Okay, so this is basically, it's an instance variable, but it's an important one, so we put it there because there's going to be more than one function which has to deal with that connection string. Okay, so think of it as where I need to use the connection string will be a different function from where I set the value for the connection string. 2 different functions. The way to make it available in both of them is to make it an instance variable. Okay, that concept is very important for what we want to do. Okay, so try to start thinking about the reason why we do things like this. Okay, this is going to be the actual connection to the database. And we don't have a database to connect to yet, so it's just set to none. That's equivalent to Java's null. That means it's nothing at this point. It's a null object. Okay, SQL. This is going to be the SQL statement that you would like to run at some point, and so it's just set to an empty string. The geometry means the upper left corner is at 50/50. It's 700 pixels wide, 600 pixels high. And you're, of course, welcome to change those values if you want to make it bigger. Making it smaller might make it a little hard to see certain things. Okay, window title, database query tool that shows up in the title when you run it. And self.show means display this object which inherits from the QMain window. So you show the window. That's basically what it's saying. Okay, so init UI calls a couple of functions, okay, basically to do things. Okay, so we add the tab, and then after the tabs are added, then it calls these two functions that basically is populating the two different tabs that we have for the database. We won't have to make much changes to what's on the tabs, but what gets displayed on the tabs, that's actually going to be affected by what we do. Okay, so for now, you can sort of ignore the stuff that's in the tabs. Just be happy you didn't have to write all that stuff there. Now, we're going to come back to some of it so that it's going to be easier to make sense out of certain things. Okay, so those are the two tabs. Set database, that's already built in. So if a user enters in all the correct information to connect to a database that exists on the machine, right, inside that PostgreSQL container, then we can actually connect to the database, and we are making use, okay, of those text boxes. So if you see my names where I put something underscore edit, that means that it's an edit box, which think of it, that's just a text box where people can enter things. So if I were to run the program again, just so that you can see stuff, okay, these are edit boxes. Okay, so somebody enters something in there, we're going to grab that in order to do something. Simplest way to understand this point is that if I put the information there for a database, okay, and then I click OK, then we connect to that database. So it shows, there's a status line here, connected, and then it also shows what tables are in that database as well as what views are already stored inside of that database, right? So don't overthink it, just think these are places for the user to enter things, right? So that when they click OK, it connects to that database. So if I were to switch this to proj2 underscore db, and I click OK, since I've already created that database, then it connects to it, right? Okay, so if you start thinking overall why we're doing something like this, one reason for doing it is that within the same program, I can connect to a database, I can do some things with it, and then I can connect to a different database and do some things with it. So as far as a database management tool, right, this is a GUI way of doing it as opposed to running everything from the command line. Okay, command line is good, easier to put things into a shell script if you do everything from a command line. So this program tries to make it so that you can run SQL scripts, okay, which basically are the kind of things that you would be running on the command line anyway. Okay, there's two tabs. Once you actually connect to a database, let me connect back to the lab 1 database. Okay, you could query that database. Let's see, there's cars, sales, customers. So if I say select star from cars, that's that self.sql variable. It's going to store that string. If I go OK, then the table, which was originally set to none, now is actually constructed, and then it shows the result of that query, right? So I can query stuff inside of the database, and so if I go back to this, let me look at this one, BobDB. That's created at the beginning of the class. Okay, there was a table called students, so if I go select star from students, then it shows what's inside of that table, right? I can change to a different database, I can run queries on it, but this part here, or actually we create a menu item that allows us to run SQL scripts. We could run init.sql, we could run other functions which basically are going to include things in, we could run things as though we're including it. Yeah? So run init.sql or run insert funcs.sql, that's something we'll do for project 2. You could run those scripts. Okay, so it's not just for querying the database, It's also for actually manipulating the database, running whatever SQL scripts you want to do. So when it comes back to authentication, if we had a database where we need to use it partly for authentication, if we are doing the authentication and it's PostgreSQL, so we're using PLPGSQL for that authentication, then we could even include the authentication functions for the functions for performing authentication by including an SQL script. Okay, so essentially we could manage the whole thing from something like this if it's all PLPGSQL as opposed to PHP. Because we can't run PHP stuff here, okay, that requires the PHP interpreter. We don't have access to that inside of a Python program. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a feel for what the program does currently. Okay, if you look at the command line, what's important about that is that I left some print statements that were used to help debug the program when I was originally creating it. And we will print stuff to the console, and sometimes we're going to take a look at what's going on in the console because that will allow us to do more incremental development. Okay, when you're writing a GUI program, one of the problems is before you can see some result, it has to be something that's visible within the user interface of the GUI program. When you write a console-based program, you can just print some intermediate result. Well, we're going to do that anyway, and then look inside of the console to just see some of those print statements, because that will allow us to develop the program in smaller pieces, basically. Okay, so coming back to this, it says make a menu item for opening the SQL script using a Qt GUI QAction, okay, item, and then connect this menu item to a function called open SQL script. Okay, so if you look here and you followed through on this page that just has, that's a CENT110 page that goes into writing PySide programs. It has adding a menu, so then it would explain how those menus work. Okay? And then so when you add a menu item, okay, here's a menu, this is a file menu. Here's a menu item, so qtgui.qaction, that's a menu item. Okay? So you put the name that you want to show up for the menu item. Self refers, of course, to this object here, right? So this window, if you want. Okay, and then there's a menu item name dot triggered dot connect. That means that when you click on the menu item, it's going to call this function here. So you're connecting this function to the action of clicking on that menu item. Okay, that's the basic idea. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I got set database there and run query. That was so that if I do select star from students, then it can display the results from running that query. Resetting the table, that means that when I do a query and I do a different query right after that, it has to reset the table to put the new results inside of that table. That's what this function does. Okay? And it's important to start getting a feel for what those things do, because even though you didn't write that program, it's going to be helpful in completing the parts that you have to do to understand basically what those things do. Okay, so finally I reach init menu. I called it this because this function initializes the menu. And right now, there's one menu item. It shows up like this, quit. That's all that's there. So basically, we need to add an open menu item. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so right after my line 168, I'm going to say open equals. Okay, and then I'm going to type, just like the line below that, Qt GUI. You could even copy and paste that. QAction. Okay, this is going to say open But I want to make it a little more descriptive than just the word open. So I'm going to go open SQL script and then put self. Okay, so that looks like the line below, except this text here is this. Okay, now if you recall from doing Java Swing programming in ICS 111, when you're creating the menu items, right, J menu item type stuff, this text is super important because that's part of the action command that basically tells you, okay, this is what you do when this menu item is clicked on. This has a different event handling model. The way it's handled is like this: open dot triggered dot connect. Okay, and I'm going to put self dot open SQL script. Okay, that's the name of the function that is going to get called when I click on the open menu item. And then what I also want to do is take my file menu, okay, and then add that action. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about Python GUI programming is that, in fact, Python programming in general, is that even though it recognizes that these are keywords, right, because there's actually a function named open, that's the one we use when we want to open a file, it's okay for setting them as variables like this because it sees that you're not putting open with parentheses, so it knows it's not the function, and you let it go as a variable name. Some languages would not let you do that, but Python lets you get away with it. But if you're worried about stuff like that, you could have named this item OpenSQL or something like that, right? So that would have been okay. All right. If I try to run this program right now with those changes, I'm going to get an error. And the reason why I'm going to get an error is I tried to connect OpenSQL script, the function, to the action of clicking on that menu item. But I didn't define that function. So if I were to try to run this right now, which we will, even though there's going to get an error, you're going to see it's going to say OpenSQL script doesn't exist. Okay, so let's do that just so that you can see that. Okay, so I'll hit this, and right now it says has no attribute. QueryDB, remember that's the name of my class. It's saying it doesn't have an OpenSQL script, either a property or a function. That's all that that means. And so just go, okay, yeah, we expected that. We need to define such a function. Okay, so I'm going to check my indent type. I don't know why it was tabbed. It should have been spaces. Okay, and then document indent width 4, that looks good. Okay, then I'm also going to do document replace tabs with spaces in case there were any tabs in there. Okay. So I go def open SQL script. Okay, and this has to have at least the parameter self because it's a class function. This gives it access to all the instance variables of the class. Any variables that are defined as self dot something. Okay, so if I even put the word pass in here, which is placeholder for no operation, but it's still a valid instruction, which means don't do anything. If I were to go back to the terminal and run this again, then my program starts up. I don't have a syntax error anymore because that thing exists, right? Okay, it doesn't do anything, but it exists. Now, of course, we want to make it do something, but that's basically how we start. Okay, so if I do this file and I click on Open SQL script, nothing happens because all that's inside of the function is just pass, so it doesn't do anything, right? So I'm going to close this. I can either go File Quit or click on the Close button. Let's practice some more incremental development, right? So all we did was we added a new QtGUI action object, okay, called open. We connected the open SQL script function to open, and then we added open to the menu. That's all we've done so far. Okay, but That's a lot if you've never done PySide programming before, right? That's a lot of steps right in there. Now, at the end of today, I will upload my version of project2.py into the daily work folder. So if you get stuck on any part, okay, don't panic, because you'll be able to get to that a little bit later. Okay, so let me give you an example, a real simple example, overly simple example of how we can use the console to help us debug the program. So if I go print open SQL, oh, sorry, this should have been in quotes, open SQL script called, okay, instead of pass, I say print this. So when I run the program, I can check in the console to see if it actually prints this, so I know that the connection between that menu item and this function has been properly established. Okay, so let's do that. So I run this, starts up, I go File, Open SQL Script. Can't see anything just yet, but I'm going to basically bring up the conemu terminal, and you can see this got called. Yeah? So real simple, but it's the kind of thing that if you do it before you start writing the function, then at least you know the connection is there, right? So if you run the you click on that menu item, nothing happens, you will know that it at least is calling that function, right? So that's like a first step. It's like almost like step 0 when we're doing stuff like that. Okay, so let me go back to this, and then I'm going to quit. Okay, so I can quit this way also. All right, so and now I see the console, you can see the result, but we can always bring up the console. It'll help us when we're trying to develop this. Okay, any questions so far? All right, so let's look at our steps here. Okay, we made a copy, made a menu item, connect this to a function called open SQL script. So we got that done. So now we want to define this. Within this function, use the Qt QFileDialog get open file name function to get the script's file name. So what we want to do, okay, is come back here. This is to my CENT110 page, and let's scroll down a little bit further. Okay. And adding an open menu item, if you look at this, this is basically like what we did. Okay. I called my function open file in this program instead of open SQL script, but that's okay. You can see the analogy. What we want to look at right here is this line that this program line that starts on line 24 and winds up on line 25. It uses the Qt GUI QFileDialog class, and that class has a function called get open file name. Okay? And to get that to work, we gotta pass it self, and there's a comma. Then there's text that's going to show up in the title bar of the dialog box. And then this here is the path for the starting directory. So when you put a dot there, that just means open the current directory, okay, which is fine for what we want to do initially. Okay, so you could even copy this line. Okay, so I'm going Control C. And when I come back to here, okay, I'm going to paste it in. And notice that I replaced my print statement, because that was just a debug statement to make sure everything is connected. Now, I'm going to change this a little bit. So my text that goes up in the title bar, it just changes a little bit. So instead of just saying open file, it will say open SQL script, because I think that's more appropriate. Okay, so qtgui.qfileDialog. Part of the reason why I copied and pasted is because if you take a look at the style that they use in PySide, which comes from PyQt, which comes from Qt, okay, So this is basically a completely free version of PyQt. PyQt, if you're gonna sell your program, you gotta buy a license from them, which is several $100s, okay? But PySide, you can do anything with that you want with it. Okay, but if you look at the naming convention, if they have a class begins with a capital letter, then they use camel case, just like Java. Okay, so different from C, more like Java. Okay, but in Java, if they had like file name, they probably would not capitalize the N. So that's an easy mistake to make, yeah, to call get open file name and put lowercase n if you're used to Java programming. So that's why I copied and pasted, because then I don't have a typographical error to start. Okay, and just even that is enough to test my program again, because instead of just printing open SQL script call, it's now going to use the QFileDialog class to open up a dialog box. Okay, so let's do that. I come back to ConEMU, I'm going to run this again. Okay, I go to File, Open SQL Script, and the file dialog box comes up. Because the last argument was a single dot, which means current directory, that's exactly the directory that it starts in, the current directory. But you don't have to get files only from that directory. You could go up a level and you could say, I want to go into the lab3 directory. I want to grab this or something like that, right? So one of the benefits of using a GUI program is you don't have to remember like the complete or relative path to a file if it's not in the same directory. You just browse to that directory, right? I do this, I can actually browse to any directory that we have access to inside of the container. Okay, so big advantage over a console-based program. Okay, so let me close that up, and what I'm going to do, I'm going back to Laulima, and I want to go back to the daily work folder, and then inside I go to today's date, April 1st. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload my Python and my proj2.py there. So in case you got stuck on anything up until that point, even though it's a few lines, it's basically a brand new way of looking at things. You could go ahead and get that file, okay, and then continue from that point. Okay, so now what we want to do is we got it to open the Qt GUI Q input dialog. Get open file name. So now, when the script's file name is obtained, what does that mean? Okay. If file name is not equal to an empty string, that means the user didn't hit cancel or close the box. They actually clicked on a file. So we're going to employ this code. Okay. So we're going to use this. If file name not equal to empty string. Oh, that one's simple enough. I'll just type it. Okay. So if file name is not equal to an empty string, then that means the user selected something and went OK, instead of canceling or just closing the dialog box without selecting anything. So one of the most natural things to do if you're developing this is you go print and print out the value to the console, right? Do it to the console, because then we can do debugging without having to do anything more. We're not really doing anything with the file name, we're just printing it, right? So let's run the program again. Okay, and I go File, Open SQL Script, let me click on init.sql. Okay, so I do that, okay, and if you look, that's what it did. Okay, notice that when it gets the file, it has the full path to the file. That's /home/project2/init.sql. Okay, if I go back to my program and I go File, Open SQL Script, and I say demo subprocess.py and I say open, then you can see that's what shows up here, right? So I'm able to select the file name so that if I were going to actually open that file and then do something with it, that basically would be doable. Okay, so that's working up until that point, so let me quit out of there. Then what we want to do, okay, is use the Qt GUI Q input dialog get text function to get the user directory. Why do we need the user directory? Because we need the user directory because that's the location of the .pgpass file. Okay, so in this case it would be /root. Okay, but we want to let the user be able to enter that. So we're going to use Qt Q input dialog.get text. Okay, so where is that well documented? If you go to those tutorials that I say are old, but is very useful, if you click on dialogues, okay, first thing that comes up is Qt GUI.Q input dialog. What is good about this is that these set of tutorials, the author of these things puts up some of the simplest ways to make use of these kind of things. Okay, so there's number of options you can use with Q input dialog get text, but this guy uses a really simple version of it. That's what we want to make use of. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and I go back to Genie. I'm going to put that inside of here. And the indentation is going to be off and stuff, so I'm going to have to fix it. Okay, so here I want to indent this. And since this is getting kind of long, I'm going to hit a return here. Okay, and this, I got to indent this. Okay, we're going to change this code right here. All right, so I'm going to change this word from text into basically the PGPass path. I'm going to change the name of that variable. Okay, so here. The reason why we're trying to get this is we're trying to get the PGPass path /root in the case of a user inside, right, the Postgres SQL container, Docker container. But if I were running this program outside of the container, right, which you could, just on another server that has a Postgres SQL database and has Python installed, then I would want to get the path because on my regular Linux machine, that PGPass path would be /home/Vern if I'm using the Vern username, right? And I want to be able to do that so it's not hard-coded inside their program. I can actually enter it. Okay, so I'll store PGPath that way. Okay, I will leave alone. Okay, and actually I don't need this extra line here. Okay, so if okay means that the user hit okay instead of canceled or close the box without entering anything. And so what I want to do, okay, I'm going to comment out this line because I verified that that part worked. So I comment that out. Okay, but what I want to do here is I want to print a literal string and then the variable. Okay, so I'm going step by step so that I can see if I got the PGPass path correct, okay, when I run this. Okay, so I save my changes. I'm going to run this again. Okay, so So I go in here, I go File, Open SQL script. So let's say I choose init.sql. When I click Open, it brings up the Q input dialog and it's saying, oh, it says enter your name. Oh, I gotta fix that. But I'm gonna put /root. That would be correct for this Docker container. Now if I look here, it says /root, right? Let me go back to the program and let's choose a file name again. I could choose init.sql all over again. If this were my home computer, I would be putting /home/Vern. And then that would be the pgpass path, because this is the location of where .pgpass is supposed to be located, right? So I'm making it so it can work on more than just this particular container. Okay, so that appears to be working, but I saw something I didn't like, and that was here, enter your name. That doesn't make sense, right? So enter path to .pg pass location. Something like that. That's a little bit better. I'll just verify that that worked. Oops. Let's see. Yeah, run this. And I choose some file, any file, doesn't matter. I could choose that one. And see, it says enter path to .pg pass location. Okay, I like that better. Okay, and I'm going to quit this, and you can see it put in /root. That's working the way that I want. Okay, so if you notice, we're going about this and just doing a few lines at a time before testing. That requires me to use a lot of print statements because there's really almost no change in the GUI part of the program at all. So I got to print to the console so I can do smaller steps at a time. Super important when you're developing a GUI program. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's Python, so Java Swing program, whatever. The Java Swing, you're doing system.out.println all the time, so you can build the program in smaller pieces. Excuse me. Those smaller pieces are what are going to make it more likely that your program works correctly. Okay, so using this as a guide, perform the steps needed to run that SQL script. Okay, so I'm going to come back to here. This is my proj2.html, and here is demo subprocess.py. I could also, okay, do the following. So let's do it this way. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to go open. I'm going to open the file in my project2 folder. Okay, this is the one that was uploaded from last time. Okay, so I can switch back and forth between these two without having to go back to the web page. All right, so take a look at what we want to do. We want to run a sub-process, which is a way of running a process inside of another program. That's why it's called sub-process. For that to work, we need to import all these extra modules. So I'm going to start by doing this. Highlight this, Control-C, copy it, and then here at the very top where I have my other import statements, I'm going to add those in. That's the first step. Really important, right? Doesn't do anything to the code running, it's just that I won't get all these syntax errors when I try to use these modules. Okay, now, look at our program. File name, we used to prompt, right? It was a command line program, so we prompt for the file name. The user directory, which is our pgpass_path, we also used to use just an input, right? Command line program. But we have these two things now, so we don't have to get those, we already got them. All right, here's commands. Okay, so let's take commands. I'm going to copy that. And then, okay, let's go down to our function. Oops, lost track of where my, okay, here's my function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the commands. Okay, so let's put that in. Okay? Now, let's think about this now. Do we really want to leave it in this form? It's actually hard-coded to the user Bob and to the database proj2_db. Eventually, we want to change this. But when you're first building up the program and you want it to actually work on project2_db to test it, it's okay to have this hard-coded. Okay? But eventually you gotta fix this. Okay? Alright. So, hard coding is okay when you're first creating because that's a faster way to get stuff to work. Okay? But eventually you need to fix it. And I'll point this out again when we come back to this. But again, to develop things, a lot of times you want to do stuff so that it reduces the sources of error, reduces how many things can go wrong. When you get it to work, then you make it more flexible so it can work with different databases, different usernames and everything like that. In fact, the username in the database, we can get that from those text boxes on that first tab. So we know we can actually get these values. So the only two that we each actually need are these two, but we're going to start with these two to simplify things, right? Make it simple first. Solve a specific case first, if that's simpler, then make it more generalized. That's a good way to think of when you're writing the code. Okay, so I need that pgpath_path is the directory, which is we call pgpath, okay, but we just need to add this on to the end of it. Okay, so let's add that into our code on proj2.py. I'm going to say pgpath_path equals pgpath_path plus, okay, slash dot pgpath. Okay? So I just append on to the end of it. I could have put pgpath_path plus equals this string, but I'll make it explicit like this. So the existing one, which we got from the user, we just add slash dot pgpath. Why a dot for pgpath? Because then that hides it from normal. When we just do a regular ls, it hides it, right? If you go ls-a, then it shows. But if you go ls, it doesn't show anything that begins with a dot, right? Directories or anything like that. So, I'm going to take this line here, I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to paste it here. So, why would I do that? Because I want to just see that it's making the correct value for pgpath_path. Okay, I'm trying to make it, test it. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, small steps again. Okay, so I go open SQL script, init.sql, path/root. Okay, I go OK. I'm just going to close this, and it shows pgpath. It put on the /path. So that's the correct path that we need to use as far as this code is concerned. All right, now we got two cases. The pgpath file exists or it doesn't exist. So let's set up a simple way of doing those two cases. Okay, so remember I did the import above, so os.path, that module already is yanked in, right? So I can take code that looks just like this. So I'm going to highlight this code. Okay, so I'm going to go Control-C to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so if this exists, what do we do? Print .pgpath exists. Right? Doesn't do anything, just prints that. Okay, I don't need this. Oh no, I can leave that. That's good. And then I put else print .pgpath does not exist. There's only two possibilities, right? It either exists where you say it's supposed to be, or it doesn't exist. We're not doing anything yet, we're just verifying if it exists or not. Okay, so I go Control S, save this, I'm gonna run this. Okay, I go File, Open SQL script, init.sql/root, and I go OK, and I take a look at this. It says .pgpass exists because I created it last time. Okay, so that's fine. Now let me come back to this. Okay, what if I had done this? I go Open SQL script, and then I put something incorrect here, like I put /home/Vern. Okay, then I go OK, and I take a look at this. Doesn't exist because there is no .pgpass file inside of /home/Vern. In fact, there is no /home/Vern even, right? Okay, so let me get back to the program. Okay, so that's working the way that I want. Okay, so if I know that this exists, right, then the part of the code I'm going to develop first to get to see if it works or not will be the one that it exists, because I know that it exists. What does that mean? Okay, that means that I got my selection statement here. The two cases is if it exists and if it doesn't exist. I'm going to develop the one that it exists first because I know it exists, right, on my machine. If yours didn't exist, then you would develop this one first, right? Or add in the .pgpass, verify that it works, and then develop this part here. Either way. Okay, now that was a bunch of steps. So I'm going to come back to here, okay, and I'm going to say upload file. And I select this. Okay, now, if you look, I can either overwrite, which I don't want to do. I'm going to go create new version, which is the default in this version of Laulima. So if you look at mine, there's two project 2 PYs. If I shrink the zoom, okay, I zoom out, and I zoom out far enough, you can't read it very easily, but I can assure you that they have different timestamps and different sizes, so you can tell which one is the more current of the two. So if you wanted to track the changes, this gives you the opportunity to do so, because this is the older one, that's the newer one. Okay, let me bump that back up in size. All right. So again, if you got stuck partway along, you can always go ahead and grab that, or you can look at that and then make changes to your program. Okay, so, okay, I know I'm beating this idea to death, but just to get this stuff, we tried several things, right? We stopped, we tested, stopped, and tested. That's incremental development, right? Don't try to do this all at once. You certainly are capable of typing all these lines at once. We don't want to do it that way, right? We verify each step along the way works, then you have way less problems when you're trying to debug the program. Okay? So, since it does exist, okay, I'm going to minimize, going to comment down now. Let's work on this part. Okay, so that's this one. It exists, so we want to do things like this. Okay, so let's look at this line. Do I need this line? Yeah, I need that line. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it in here. By doing it one line at a time, I'm going to have less indentation issues to deal with. So that's why I'm doing it one line at a time. Okay, alt file is this. Yep, I can use that like this. So I copy this, and I paste it here. Okay, so here I'm just doing simply cut and paste. Okay, now here, look at this. Take a look at this. Control C, paste it. Okay, let's talk about this line here, my current line 185. I'm writing this information, which means that I'm trying to make inside my .pgpass file, one of the entries be, this is the host name, that's correct, because we're inside the container, so it's localhost. This is the part name, that's correct. That doesn't change, that's always correct. Proj2 underscore DB, that's only if we're trying to connect to proj2 underscore DB. So this eventually has to be changed, so basically you're getting it from the text box, yeah? So that the user can specify the name. All right, database name, username, password. The user supplies all of those in practice. But in development, leaving it like this, because we do have a database named project2 underscore DB, and Bob and SUMPASS are valid username and password. We leave it like that. It's hard coded, but it's okay because we're only developing it. This is not the final version of our product. Okay? So that's hard coded, but fine. Because we just want to see if we can get it to work. Right? Okay. So I come back to this. I'll file that close. Oh yeah, good idea. So it finishes writing to it. Okay. So I come back to here, paste that in. Okay, that's good. Let's continue. Subprocess.run. This thing. Okay. Everything there is fine. That's general. That would work for anything. That works in general. The hard-coded one is line 185, right? Then we need to copy this. This is okay. Oops. Okay, that here return. Go to the other one. Set it back to the correct permissions. Okay, that's true in general. And then remove this file that we copied to. Don't want to leave that lying around. Okay, so all these things here, the only line that is hard-coded is this line here, line 185. Okay, so remind yourself that that one you have to fix. All the rest of the stuff would work irrespective of which database, which username and password. So the key thing here, right, is we want to test this. And the only script that we have to run on proj2 underscore DB is init.sql, which we already ran. Okay, but let's fix that. Okay, so we're doing Python programming here. Let's open a second conemu terminal. Okay, make sure that you put in the environment variables and pipe it into this window. Change it to the main Docker directory. And then go into the Postgres SQL container. And run bash. So that in one of my terminals I can do Python programming, the other terminal I can look at what's going on inside the database, right? So let's change. Okay, so I'm in here. This is where we're going to do our Python programming. This is where we got the database. Okay, I don't put -w. Why? Because the .pgpass file exists, so I should be able to connect just like that, right? The .pgpass file exists, has the correct information, so I'm connected. So if I do \d, everything is there, because I already ran init.sql. So let's do the following. Drop table cars. Okay, and if I do \d now, I'll go, oh, I got rid of that. Okay, what about if I go drop table customers? Okay, \D, getting rid of them slowly, right? Drop table sales and drop table users cascade. Now if I do \D, nothing, right? All clean inside of there. Okay, so let's test if our stuff really works. So I run the Python program, it starts up, okay? And because I hard-coded everything to project 2, I don't even need to enter all the stuff in here, right? So I'm going to go File, Open SQL Script, init.sql, okay, /root. I go OK. Oh, did it work? Well, let's look at my second terminal, which is open to the database. So I go \D, not empty. So init.sql must have worked, right? Because it just created all of those tables. Okay, so I'm going to come back to here. Let me close this. And then if you look at this console, yeah, this is where I started running the program right here. You can see all of this stuff. So that gets shown in the console, the results of running init.sql on that database. So you could also see it there. So even if we didn't have that second window, you could have said, oh yeah, it did run. Okay, now, what we'll do, let's do one more thing and then we'll take a break. Notice that it's kind of useful, right, to be able to drop all of the stuff that's put in there by using init.sql. Instead of just rewriting it, it's kind of nice to drop it. So let's create a script that allows us to do that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to save it into the project 2 folder. I'm going to call it drop.sql. Okay, so drop table if exists cars. Drop table if exists customers. Well, in fact, if I wanted to, let me open, this is another way, easier way. If I init.sql, you see these? I could have just copied and pasted it in here. Okay? That's what init.sql does at the beginning. But what if I just do this without creating anything? That's a reasonable thing to have for drop.sql. So watch this, and we'll take a break right after this. Okay? I'm going to run the program, right? And I'm going to look at the database. Stuff is there, right? So I go back to my program, so I gotta go back this way, because I'm in such a low resolution. I'm going to go open SQL script, drop.sql. Okay, so the path /root. Okay, and then I come back to this, and I'll go \D. Just cleared it out, right? And then so I come back to my program. Sorry, I gotta do a little clumsily. I will open SQL script init.sql. Okay, /root. Okay, and then if I do \D, they're back again, right? So I'm actually running the SQL script on that database. Okay, let's stop there, take a break for about 5 minutes, then we'll come back and then work on some of the other stuff. Okay, so let's get started up again. All right, so remember, line 185 is hard-coded, okay? And so you're gonna have to make changes to that before you turn the project in. But for today, that's good enough. Now, what you can also do when you get a chance is to take these lines here, right, and copy them one by one into this else part, then get rid of your .tg pass file or rename it temporarily, and then get it so that you can execute things when the path doesn't exist. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm not certain if I made any changes since the last one, so I'll just upload it anyway. Okay, create new version. Yeah, I must have made changes because it's bigger size. Okay, so that's where I wanted to get to with respect to proj2.py, but let's look at what else we have on the agenda. Okay, so we carried out these steps using incremental development, right? We did it very slowly, actually, and it's still not simple because there's a lot of brand new stuff for you. So don't worry about it if it seems a little bit confusing at this point. That's why we're going over in class. That's why I make the code available. So in case yours didn't work out, you can just use what I have and study what I did to see the steps along the way. Okay, step 2, create insert funcs.sql using project2.html. All right, so I go to Genie, I go new, so I got an empty thing right here. Then I go back to my project2.html, right, the main project file, and I'm going to scroll down till I can see, oh, there's init.sql, got that last time. Then here's the insert funcs.sql to use. Okay, so I'm going to grab this. Okay, copy that, paste it into this blank area. Okay, and I'm going to save it as my, into project 2, sorry, as my insert funcs. Okay. So what this does is if I were to include this into the project2_db database, okay, then it would drop these functions if they existed, and then it would create all these functions. Add car, what is it used for? To insert a car record into the database. Add customer, what is that for? To insert a customer into the database. Okay. Get car ID, what is that used for? So that you can insert a sale, okay, record into the database. You need the car ID and you need to be able to get the customer ID. That's what those are for. Then add sale calls those functions to get the car ID and then the customer ID. Okay, so if you specify the make and model of the car, first name and last name of the customer, then it can get the car ID and the customer ID, assuming that data has already been entered into the database. So when you are going to add data into the proj2_db database, you got to add in your car records and your customer records before you try to add in any of your sales records, right? The sales doesn't even make sense, right, if the car or the customer doesn't exist to say that you made a sale of a certain car to a certain customer. It doesn't make sense until you get those things in. Okay, so what it means for the project is that when you finally come up with your add initial data.sql, you're going to insert the cars, then insert the customers, could do customers and then cars, doesn't matter. Okay? Cars or customers, but those have to be before you insert the sales into it. Okay? That's the main thing to keep in mind. So, oops, my program is still running. So let me close it. Okay, so now I have insert funcs.sql put into there as well. Okay, and then I could include that into the project either by running the GUI program or just by doing it right here, /I insert funcs.sql. But let's not do that. What I want to do is I want to look at how we can process cars.txt and use it with the function inside of insert funcs.sql to create the beginning, okay, of our add initial data.sql. But that's way down the line. We want a program, a Python program that will process this so that it will make use of the add car function inside of here. So for that, we got to look at, well, let's create, let's not do it that way. Let's go back here. We're going to make a new file. And let's just call this make car data.py. I'm going to save it inside of project 2. Make car data.py. All right. So what we want to do, I want this, be able to get to this. I don't need, maybe I might need init.sql. Let me keep that up there. I don't need drop.sql, so I'm going to close that. I don't need demo subprocess.py or proj2.py at this point. But what I would like to open is cars.txt. Okay? Cars.txt is a vertical bar separated file, and not comma or tabs, vertical bar. I want to read this in to get to this information. Okay, so if you take a look at this, the first line is a header row. We don't really need that. The last line also, right, is something that we don't need. So let's start with the following. Okay, so in file equals open cars.txt. We're opening it for reading. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in file.readLine. If I needed the headers from that, then maybe I would save it. Offhand, I don't think I'll need it, but maybe I will. But anyway, I read that. So when I do lines equals in file.readLines, okay, then I skipped over that header line. So lines has all the lines I need plus one more, right? So let's start to process that. Since I don't want to process the whole list, I want to do everything except the last line. Let's use an index-based for loop to process that list. Okay, so I'll go for I in range 0, okay, up to length of lines -1. Okay. That way, I don't get the last line that just said 12 rows. Okay, so I'm just going to go print lines index I. Real simple way to start off. It should just print all of these lines here, except it's not going to print the first line because I skipped over that. And I stopped short of this last line, so it shouldn't print that one out if I did this correctly. So let's go here to my terminal. And I'll go Python 3 make data, make underscore car underscore data.py. and this is what I see. Okay, now I should have stripped each line so that I don't get this blank line in between. Okay, and then also we know we're gonna split this data apart, right? So let's do that. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I'll just verify that if I call strip on it before I print it, then it gets rid of all those extra blank lines in between. Okay, if I split this, I need to split it on the vertical bar. Okay, and then what I have inside of there are the car ID numbers, the make, the model, and the price. Okay, if I split it up. So let's do that. Okay, so this was working. So I'm going to say tokens is equal to lines index I dot strip dot split, but here I split on the vertical bar. Yeah? Not a comma, not a tab, vertical bar, and then I just print. Just print out the list that result. Okay, so small steps at a time again. Let's run this again. Okay, and that's what we see. Okay, so remember when you call split, it returns a list of strings. So if you had these, to treat those as actual numbers and not strings, you would have to convert them. However, since we're going to be using this in order to create insert statements, actually we want it to be string because you would have to convert it to strings anyway when you concatenate it into the final string. So that's actually a good thing. Okay, so no conversion necessary in this case. Now, the next step is I need to look at my insert functions.sql and look up the add car function. The add car function needs for me to pass the make, the model, and then the price. Okay? So when I call it, okay, then this thing should have quotes around it. This should have, oh no, sorry, this should be string, and then, oh, maybe we'll run into some issues with the price. We're gonna have to see. Okay, so we're gonna have to look at this and then see how it goes. Okay, but if I pass make, model, and price, all I gotta do is go select, add car, then pass it the make, the model, and then the price. So this is what we're gonna do. We already printed out the tokens. Okay, so make is gonna be tokens index, what index? What index is the make? 1, very good. Okay, so there's a 1 in here. Model equals tokens index 2, and price equals tokens index 3. Okay, so let's do the following. Print, right? Select, add car, okay, and then we need to combine this with the make, plus a comma, plus the model, okay. Okay, let's make another print statement. Print, let's see, I need a comma, and then plus price, okay, plus the ending parentheses, and then a semicolon, and then let's see what that looks like. Okay, so this is my first pass at trying to make it look like what it's supposed to be. Okay, And then I'll print it, I run it, and then let's see what it looks like. Okay, so I run it. It goes select, add car, Toyota Corolla 18,500. Okay, so we have a problem here. Because all those strings, Toyota Corolla, Toyota Camry, and things like that, those need to be inside of single quotes. So if we go back here, let's do that. Okay, so select add car, let's put a single quote there. Let's put single quote here, single quote here, single quote here. All right, and I'm not sure if that's exactly correct, but let's run it again and then let's see. Looks okay to me. Okay, so that's the basic idea, okay, for getting that to work. So let's do the following, okay? Redirection. I just created the file, testaddcars.sql, right? So let's do the following. Here's our database, okay? \d, we got all those things. \df, oh, nothing, because I forgot to go insert funcs, right? I didn't include that yet. So let's do that. \I, insert funcs.sql, okay? So if I do \df, now I got all these functions, right? I got the add car function, which is the thing that I need. Okay, so how about, what should I do to check this out? What should I do to make use of testaddcars.sql? Nothing? Anything? The SQL script, I could include it, right? And then if it works, then we should see some cars in the cars table. Okay? So let's try that. Okay? Got those things in, so then that works. Okay? So what did we do? We write the Python program, we gradually modified the output until it looked like it's the appropriate SQL insert statement. So actually, it's actually calling the add car function, which does the insert. And then I verified, right, that if I include insert funcs.sql, and then I just did that testing, which would be the beginning of my add initial data.sql, then I got that to work. Okay, so here's what you want to do. Okay, so if you look at this list of things, okay, write scripts that, Python script, actually it should be just script, that will process cars.txt into SQL statements that can insert the car, should make use of add car as defined in insert funcs.sql. That's exactly what I did, right? I wrote the program, okay, I included insert funcs.sql, and then I included testaddcars.sql, and it put those cars in, and then now I got that data stored inside of that. Okay, so that's that step accomplished. Okay, so what is the next step? It says start writing Python scripts, or a script that will process customers.txt into SQL statements that can insert customers' data, should make use of add customer. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm going to write another program like this, but it's going to read customers.txt instead of cars.txt. And instead of saying select add car, it's going to say select add customer. And we want to make use of this function, okay, which has the parameters first name, last name, and sex. Basically, that's how we set stuff up. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do then is look at the example that we just did. Oh, before I forget, let's upload insert funcs and make card data.py. So that, again, that's inside the folder for today under the daily work. So using this as an example, okay, and then including this into your database, basically make it so you can process customers.txt so you can add all the customers into the database. Okay, so go ahead and the time we have remaining, go ahead and work on that and see if you can get that done. If you can get it done, then you're in very good shape for completing the project. Okay, so go ahead and work on that.